All right, so game week 30 in FPL. It's practically upon us, isn't it? And as always, you've been busy. You've sent over a ton of great stuff, YouTube videos with all the game week 30 strategy talk and the data deep dives, podcast snippets, with the usual EPL predictions and those transfer rumors that always get us going. And then a whole stack of articles just packed with FPL tips and team news, tactical analysis, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, I mean, you've really done your homework, haven't you? It's a gold mine, really. We've got a lot to unpack here.
We do, we do. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. Cut through all that noise, right? Really pinpoint those key insights, those aha moments, the stuff that can really make a difference to your FPL decisions.
Exactly. And with the Game Week 30 deadline looming, Tuesday, April 1st, 6:15 p.m. BST, we don't have a lot of time to mess around, do we?
Not at all. So we're going to be laser focused today. We'll break down how those FA Cup results and, of course, those all-important injury updates are shaking things up, dive into the chip strategies, wild carding, all that good stuff. And, of course, we'll highlight some players, the ones who could be real game changers this game week.
Sounds good.
So no time to waste. Let's get straight into it. The Game Week 30 landscape and, well, I think it's safe to say the FA Cup weekend threw us a few curveballs, didn't it?
It really did. I mean, the biggest thing that jumps out right off the bat is the injury concerns, right? And we have to start with the big one, don't we? Erling Haaland.
Oh, yeah.
Those reports of him leaving the Etihad in a protective boot after the Bournemouth game, that's got to be a worry, hasn't it? We're waiting for Pep's press conference on Tuesday for the official word, but you've got to say his chances of playing against Leicester on Wednesday, well, they're looking pretty slim.
It's massive, isn't it? I mean, Haaland has been the captain choice for so many, hasn't he? This throws a real spanner in the works, doesn't it? Suddenly, all those captaincy plans, those carefully crafted team structures, well, they're all up in the air. And then there's Chris Wood at Forest. Nuno Espirito Santo didn't exactly paint a rosy picture, did he? Describing the hip injury as, and I quote, not good. A big contusion. That doesn't sound promising at all.
No, it doesn't. And they're saying it's being assessed day by day, but to be honest, his involvement against Manchester United is looking pretty doubtful at this point. It's a real shame for anyone who is eyeing him up as a budget-friendly forward option.
It is. And it's not just Wood for Forest, is it? Morgan Gibbs-White came off late in that FA Cup tie as well.
Right, yeah. And they mentioned fatigue after extra time, and I think he had a bit of a collision with the post, too.
Right.
But yeah, even his availability for the midweek game is a question mark now, so Forest could be without two key attackers.
It's definitely adding to the pre-game week 30 anxiety, isn't it? But hey, it's not all doom and gloom. We've got some positive news as well. Bukayo Saka, for example.
Oh, right, yes.
Arteta has said he's back and ready to go for Arsenal's clash with Fulham. He obviously missed the previous game week, so that's music to the ears of his owners, isn't it? And maybe a bit of a tempting differential punt for those who don't have him.
Yeah, for sure. Saka being back fit, it gives you that immediate option in midfield, that high upside potential. And as you said, with his ownership levels not sky high, if he hits the ground running against Fulham, well, that could be a real differentiator.
It could. And we also have news on Jean-Philippe Mateta at Palace. He's back from injury, played in their FA Cup game. And what's really interesting here is his recent form. 8 goals in his last 8, that's impressive. And his ownership is still relatively low, around 6.7%.
Yeah, although we are seeing those transfers and starting to climb.
We are. And with a home fixture against Southampton, who, let's face it, have been the leakiest defense in the league, he's definitely one to watch.
Absolutely. And it's worth noting that penalty situation at Palace as well, isn't it? Mateta's first in line, followed by Eze.
Good point. So a real mixed bag of injury news, creating a lot of dilemmas for FPL managers. And it seems like this uncertainty, especially around Haaland and Wood, is having a huge impact on how people are thinking about their chip strategy. Wildcard seems to be the hot topic, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Looking at what you've sent over, it's clear that a lot of managers are thinking about wildcarding in Game Week 30. There was even a poll suggesting that a large chunk are either planning to do it or have already made the decision. Haaland's injury and the Wood situation seem to be the main drivers.
Right, so let's dig into that a bit. What are the main advantages of playing the wildcard in Game Week 30, given the current landscape?
Well, the most immediate advantage is that it lets you deal with those injury headaches, doesn't it? If you've got Haaland, Wood, or both, wildcarding lets you bring in replacements who are fit and firing without taking those hits for extra transfers.
Yeah.
But it's not just about firefighting, is it? Wildcarding now also gives you the chance to use the assistant manager chip strategically, maybe in game weeks 31 to 33. That's a really powerful option.
Yeah, the extra free transfers over a few game weeks, that can be a real game changer.
Exactly. And then, of course, you can start bringing in players from teams with those juicy double game weeks coming up. You know, Arsenal, Man City, Newcastle, Palace. It's a chance to get ahead of the curve.
It makes a lot of sense. So for those who are leaning toward that game week 30 wild card, what are the key players they should be looking at? Who's emerging as a popular target?
Well, Omar Marmoush at 7.3 million, he's looking like a strong option if Haaland is indeed ruled out. He'd likely lead the line for City against Leicester, and he's already shown he can deliver, hasn't he? Scored a goal coming off the bench in the FA Cup, and he's got a couple of double-digit hauls this season. Mateta, as we discussed, is another popular pick. That form, that fixture, it's hard to ignore, isn't it? And targeting teams with good fixtures in general, like Bournemouth against Ipswich, Palace against Southampton, even City against Leicester if Haaland's out. That's a smart approach. And don't forget about those players who blanked in game week 29 but have got nice matchups now. Daniel Munoz at Southampton, Mateta again, Alexander Isak at Newcastle, they could be worth bringing back in.
So lots for the wild carders to think about. But what about those managers who are holding on to their wild card for now? What other chip strategies are they considering?
Well, for those biding their time with the wild card, the most common strategy we're seeing is to activate it in game week 31. That gives them another week of information, right? You know, potential fixture changes, more clarity on those double game weeks. It's a bit more of a wait and see approach. And then, of course, there are various plans for the other chips. Some are thinking triple captain in game week 32. Others are looking at bench boost in 33. And then there's the free hit in 34, which, as things stand, looks like it's going to be a big blank game week.
Right. Only 7 confirmed fixtures as it stands.
Exactly. And the free hit, well, the timing of that is going to be crucial.
Yes, it is. Okay, let's get a bit more specific now. Player recommendations. We've touched on a few names already, but let's break it down by position. Starting with forwards. Putting Haaland aside for a moment, who are the standouts?
Well, if Haaland is out, as we've said, Marmoush at 7.3 million becomes a very tempting pick up front for City against Leicester.
Right.
Mateta at 7.5 is in fantastic form, and that Southampton's defense, well, it's a dream fixture for any forward. And don't underestimate the value of his relatively low ownership. He could be a real differential.
You good?
Alexander Isak, 9.3 million, has a home game against Brentford. He scored in the reverse fixture, and he tends to do well at St. James's Park, so he's one to consider. And maybe a bit more of a left field option. Antoine Semenyo at Bournemouth, 5.7 million. He's been flying under the radar a bit, but he's got a good fixture against Ipswich, who've been pretty generous at the back lately.
Okay, good to know. Moving on to midfield. With Saka potentially back in the mix, he has to be high on the list, doesn't he?
Oh, absolutely. Saka, 10.2 million, should be fit for Fulham. He's so consistent, and as we said earlier, he could be a real differential if he performs well.
Right.
Justin Kluivert at Bournemouth, 6.2 million, is another one who's caught my eye. He's been creating chances for fun lately and getting some attacking returns. And that Ipswich fixture looks very appealing. Bruno Fernandes, he's a popular transfer target this week and for good reason. And let's not forget Savinho at City, 6.2 million. He's been a bright spark in what's been a bit of a, well, maybe a slightly underwhelming season for City overall.
Interesting. And lastly, any defensive picks that you're particularly keen on?
Daniel Munoz at Southampton, 5.1 million, has been racking up the FPL points recently. A goal, some assists, a few clean sheets. And they've got that game against Fulham. Arsenal and City defenders are always worth considering, especially with those double game weeks on the horizon. Josko Gvardiol at City, he's one that's been mentioned specifically.
Okay, solid advice. Now, we touched on the double game weeks earlier, but let's zone in on that game week 34 blank. It sounds like that's a major factor in chip strategy, isn't it?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, right now we've got 3 confirmed postponements for game week 34, City versus Villa, Arsenal versus Palace. And those are almost certain to be moved to double game week 33.
Right.
So that leaves us with, as you said, just 7 fixtures currently scheduled for 34. Bournemouth against United, Brighton against West Ham, Chelsea versus Everton, Liverpool versus Spurs, Newcastle against Ipswich, Fulham against Southampton, and Wolves versus Leicester. So yeah, a big blank game week. And it has a major impact on when you play that free hit chip, doesn't it? A lot of managers will want to use it to navigate that week with a full squad, avoid those hits for extra transfers.
Makes sense. It feels like FPL is becoming more and more data-driven, doesn't it? Analytics, statistics, they're playing a bigger role than ever. It's not just about gut feeling anymore.
No, absolutely. Analytics are becoming increasingly important in FPL. More and more managers are using data to inform their decisions, moving away from purely instinct-based picks.
Right.
Tools like FPL Review, predictions based on bookmakers' odds, they're commonplace now. And then there's the concept of expected value, EV. It's basically looking at the likely return on investment for a player based on things like shots, chances created, opponent form. It's all about maximizing your points potential.
Interesting.
But it's important to remember that market movements and these predictions, they're often intertwined, aren't they? It can be tough for a purely data-driven model to get a real edge.
It can. And of course, we can't forget about the transfer rumors. The rumor mill never stops churning, does it? Anything particularly juicy catching your eye?
Well, there are a few names being bandied about, but it's all speculation at this point, of course. Rashford to Villa for $40 million has been suggested, although some think his wages might be a stumbling block.
Oh.
Then there's Xavi Simons to Liverpool for $67 million.
Wow.
Quite a price tag. Adam Wharton to City for $70 million.
Even bigger.
Yeah, and that one might even go higher, apparently. Tyler Dibbling to Spurs for $40 million seems like a fairly believable move, potentially at a decent price. And then there's Kevin Kelleher to Bournemouth for $30 million. That's an interesting one. A homegrown keeper maybe looking for more game time?
It is. So there we have it. A whirlwind tour of the Game Week 30 landscape. We've covered a lot of ground. Injury concerns, chip strategies, player picks, the blank game week, even some transfer rumors.
We have. I think the main takeaway for FPL managers right now is that Game Week 30 feels like a real turning point. The uncertainty around Haaland, that looming deadline, the decisions about whether to play those chips, it all adds up to a crucial moment in the season.
It does. It does. And I think it reinforces the idea that while all this analysis and expert opinion can be really valuable, the best FPL decisions are the ones that are right for you, right? Your own risk tolerance, your overall strategy.
Absolutely. It's your team, your choices. Hopefully this deep dive has given you some clarity, some food for thought, some of those aha moments to help you make the right calls for your FPL team ahead of the deadline.
Couldn't have put it better myself.
Yeah.
Keep digging into those sources, keep those brains ticking, and best of luck with your transfers and your captaincy choices this game week.
Good luck.
And one last thought for you to ponder as we wrap up. With all this data and analysis at our fingertips in FPL, where do you draw the line? How do you find that balance between trusting the numbers and going with your gut? It's a question worth asking yourself because it could make all the difference in the weeks to come.
It really could.
All right, that's all from us for today. Until next time.
See you then.